Hey everyone, welcome back to Heartwood Abyss. Today we're building an ancient elven ruin in a birch forest. A final meeting place for two rulers before battle. The models used in this diorama are from rescale miniatures. I'll leave a link to them down in the description. Let's get started. I began by cutting rough shapes from XPS foam with the hot wire cutter. Here I'm only searching for the layout and overall shape of the ruins. Once the pieces felt right, I could move on to building the ruins. With the layout decided, everything was glued into place. More foam was added for platforms, arches and a large decorative arch. I also added small plaster bricks to the upper platform for extra detail. Now it was time to break it all apart again. Using a knife, pliers and a sculpting tool, I damaged the ruins to make them feel ancient and abandoned. I also carved out a small stream running between the ruins. Next came the ground layer. For this I used some homemade sculptor mold and spread it across the base. This helps remove the flat look of the foam and create a more natural terrain shape. It also blends the ruins into the landscape. While it was still wet, I pressed in some plaster rocks and smoothed everything together. Once dry, the terrain was sealed with a mix of Mod Podge and dark brown paint. This strengthens the surface and gives it a deep earthy base color. After that, I made a mud mix using fine sand, plaster, brown paint and PVA glue. It was spread across the ground to add a rich texture to the forest floor. It's a simple mix, but it works really well for natural terrain. While the mud was still wet, I added small stones across the base and extra rocks into the stream. A few sticks were also placed around the ground as fallen branches. Then I added a first layer of green flocking for early vegetation. Before moving on, I placed the birch trees temporarily to mark where they would stand later. The foam needed a protective coat, so everything was covered in a black paint mixed with Mod Podge. This helps protect the foam and gives a strong dark base for the stone colors. Now for one of my favorite parts of the build, the birch trees. These are my own sculpted and 3D printed birch trees. I'll leave a link to my mini factory store in the description if you'd like to use them yourself. To make the branches look finer and more natural, I glued small pieces of seafoam onto them. Once that was done, the trees were painted white. Then I airbrushed black onto the lower trunks and a soft brown tone onto the branches. After that, I painted in the dark bark markings, also known as lenticles. That detail really helps them look like real birch trees. For the leaves, I brushed on some watered down glue and sprinkled over real birch seeds. Because honestly, what's better leaves for a birch tree than actual birch seeds? With the trees finished, I moved back to the ruins. The stone was first painted in an Arctic grey using the airbrush. Then I used a sponge to dab on lighter tones for highlights and texture. Finally, I added a mossy green near the lower sections where moisture would naturally build up. Now it was time to bring everything together. I added ivy to the ruins using fake sheep moss, one of my favorite materials for overgrown seeds. The trees were then glued into place using a small iron wire at the bottom of each trunk to anchor them into the base. After that, I added watered down PVA glue around the trees and sprinkled on some raw birch seeds as fallen leaves. Then resin was poured into the stream for the water effects. I still wanted a bit of more color across the scene, so I added some small flower tufts, bushes and a few final touches. And now let's get onto the story. The old elven ruins had stood empty for centuries. Once they were halls of music and light, but now only broken pillars and cracked stone remained. It was there, beneath the shadows of our golden age, that two rulers came to meet. For years, humans and elves had torn the world apart. Villages burned, forests were cut down, and the dead were too many to count. Neither side could claim victory, and both were drowning in loss. So the Elven Queen chose another path. She called for a final duel, believing one battle between rulers was worth more than thousands dying in the mud of war. She arrived first, soaring above the ruins on the back of a winged lion. Graceful and silent, she looked like something carved from legend itself. Then from the distant road came the human king, riding an armored bear whose heavy steps echoed through the shattered halls. Scarred by war, yet unbowed, he came to face her alone. No armies followed them, no horns sounded, no banners flew. Only the wind moved through the stones as they looked upon each other. Two enemies, two leaders, two lives carrying the fate of nations. For a single moment the world was still. Neither knew that what would happen here would be remembered not as the end of war, but as the beginning of ruin.